Hi everybody, it's Miss Elise coming to you from the William Hall Library, and I'm here to teach you about how to build a fairy house using the template that's available on the Cranston Public Library website. Now, to get to the template, you're going to want to go to www.cranstonlibrary.org/magical-academy to find the template for the fairy house. You'll be able to print it up onto a piece of 8.5 by 11-inch printer paper, and this is what you will get. There are 2 pages. The first page has the front and back portions of your fairy house, and the second page has the walls and the roof. And if you look, you'll see there are little tabs where all of the different parts are labeled with what they are. So you see that there are 2 that say wall and 2 that say roof. And on the first page, there is one that says front and one that says back. So when you get your little print out, you can do a couple of different things with it. For instance, I printed up my template on cardstock. It's a nice, stiff, heavy paper that I could use to build my fairy house. And so when I printed it out, I decided to use a heavy paper to start. You could also print it up on regular paper and use it as a template to trace onto something really sturdy like cardboard. So you would just cut out your template using a pair of scissors. And when you're cutting, you're not going to want to cut off your tabs. You're going to want to include them when you're cutting because you're going to need those tabs to help you put your fairy house together. So I'm just going to quickly, and not too neatly, but that's okay, cut out the front of my fairy house. And so if you're transferring this onto construction paper or cardstock or a piece of cardboard, you're going to want to make sure that you keep your tabs at the bottom and on the sides if there are any. And then you can use a marker or a crayon to trace the outline onto a sturdier piece of paper. You could also build a fairy house using printer paper if you want to. You probably just wouldn't be able to add anything heavy to it. And when making a fairy house, it's all about the decoration. Fairies love anything shiny. They love anything decorative. So when you're cutting out and making your fairy house, you're definitely going to want to make sure that it looks appealing for the fairies, but it doesn't have to be too fancy underneath because you're going to cover it all up with lots of cool stuff. So yeah, just use your scissors. If you are not comfortable using scissors, this could be a really great project to do with a big brother or sister, or to do with a mom or dad or older cousin or grandma or grandpa. This could be a really fun project to do as a whole family. Everybody just makes their own fairy house, and then at the end of your project, you'll have a little fairy village. So yep, you can either just use the template straight from the computer, or you can make your own sturdier little house. Now, I said that you wanted to keep your tabs, and you do, because when you're putting your house together, you're going to want to match up your tabs and make sure that they line up. So when you're fitting your fairy house together, you can glue it together if you want to. I use tape because I am super impatient and tape doesn't take any time to dry. It really depends on what you have in your house. So I fitted all of my pieces together. I put the walls, one on each side. I put the front of the house up, the back of the house up, and I just need to put on one more piece of the roof. So let me just do that now and show you how I did it. So you'll see that I took the tabs and I bent them all down so that when you just look at the roof from the outside, all you see is a little square. But I bent all of my tabs over, and I did that on all the other pieces as well. So you just want to match those up. If you want to be extra sturdy, you could put a little bit of glue on the tabs and then kind of wait for them to dry. Or you could do what I do and be very impatient and just tape everything together a little bit sloppily, but it's okay. we're going to cover it up with stuff. It's fine if it's not completely perfect. And then at the end, you'll have a little house. So at the bottom of the wall and the front and back pieces, you'll see these longer tabs. The other tabs are kind of little rectangles. The ones at the bottom are longer rectangles. You want to keep those and fold those because they make a nice, firm base for your fairy house to stand up all on its own. So that is pretty neat. You'll notice the front of the house has a door. You can either keep the door closed, or when you've put together your fairy house, you can take your scissors and very carefully snip, snip, snip your door open and bend it back so that your fairy house looks nice and inviting. And then after you put it together, it's really up to you what you want to do to decorate your fairy house. I have two that I have been working on. So the first one, I use the template and cut out cardboard so it's nice and sturdy. And as you can see, I also painted the cardboard. So this is an important thing to keep in mind if you want to paint your fairy house before you start adding anything to it or color it in with markers or crayons or whatever you have around your house. You could do it when it's standing up and all put together. That's what I did with this one. I put my house together with tape first, and then I painted over it with some paint using a brush. Or if you're making your fairy house out of paper or something that's a little bit more bendy, before you cut out the template, you can paint it or you can color it with markers, crayons, what have you, and then put it back together after it's all colored in. But that is up to you. But once your fairy house is assembled and painted or not painted, the fun of decorating comes in. So I went out to my yard and I found some green leaves, and these are actually chives, wild chives that I found in the yard, and they smell like onions. So my fairy house kind of smells like onions, which is pretty exciting. And I found some long pieces of grass, and I just need to add a little bit more to the back. You can see it's not completely covered. I went for a cool outdoor feeling for my fairy house. I went for a little bit of a fall time feeling, what with the orange color and the little pine cones that I put on my house. But you can give your fairy house whatever kind of season, whatever kind of flavor you want. So here's a piece of grass that I got from my yard, and I'm going to use scissors just to cut it up. And then I'm using just plain old Elmer's glue to glue onto the house. Now this is an important tip. Don't be afraid of glue. If you think you're using too little glue or then add more. If you think you're using too much glue, add more. You want to make sure that everything sticks to your fairy house and does not move. Oh, these pieces are a little bit too big. So as you can see, I put a lot of glue on my fairy house, and now I'm going to stick my little bits of grass on to cover up the back wall. And depending on how artsy you are, depending on how creative you want to be, you could weave the pieces together to make it look like a woven basket, or you could just stick them on nice and plain like I'm doing. You can go as colorful or as dark as you want to. If you're using heavier things like stones or something, then Elmer's glue might not cut it. You might need a special tool called a glue gun. Now, if you're a kiddo, you're definitely going to want to ask your grown-up to help you if you decide to use a glue gun, because the glue that comes out is very, very hot and it can burn your fingers. This is why this can be a really good project for your whole family to get involved in, like I said. So it depends on what kind of crafting supplies you have around. That might influence the design of your fairy house. So this is the first one that I worked on, made of cardboard. I'm just going to set that down to dry before I do anything else to it. And then I have another fairy house that I was working on that is a lot more plain. As you can see, I didn't wind up coloring in this one. It's just the plain old cardstock. And so I want to add more things to it, especially around the back of the house, which doesn't have anything on it right now. So I went and got these big, shiny, flat leaves out of my backyard, and I'm going to add those to my fairy house. Now, these are just plain old leaves of ivy. If you're going foraging around your backyard to find materials for your house, you're going to want to take your grown-up with you. Not only is it a really fun way to go out and get some exercise, your grown-up can help you identify if any plants are maybe not plants that you want to be touching. For instance, if you have a nice garden or your neighbors have a nice garden with beautiful flowers and colorful leaves, you might be super tempted to add those to your fairy house because you want it to be beautiful. And I understand, but your neighbor might not want you touching those plants. They might be special. They might just want them in their yard just to be there as a beautiful decoration, a beautiful garden. And sometimes there are plants that can give people allergic reactions or rashes like poison ivy, and you want to make sure that you're staying away from those. You want to make sure that you're only using plants that are your plants to use for your fairy house, and also plants that aren't going to give you a rash or any other kind of allergic reaction. So with these leaves, I cut them up so that they fill in the square. I'm adding my glue. I'm using my brush just to spread the glue out into a nice even layer. And then I'm going to add my leaves. And I'm going to go all around until my fairy house is covered up. There we go. And I just have to wait for it to dry. So that's basically it. The cool thing about fairy houses is that apart from putting the template together, there really aren't any rules. You can go as grand or as plain as you want to. You could even use materials that don't come from the outside. You could use beads or you could use sparkles. If you're going to use things that are made out of plastic though, or things that aren't what we call organic, that aren't going to sort of decompose, you're going to want to keep that fairy house inside your house. If you're using materials from the outside, then you can leave your fairy house outside in your yard or in any other outdoor space that you have. But if you're using materials like plastic, like beads, like sequins, like glitter, then you're going to want your fairy house to be an indoor fairy house because you don't want any animals or fairies coming to your house and then, you know, accidentally chewing on some plastic. That's not fun for anybody. So yeah, that is how to make a fairy house courtesy of the Cranston Public Library. If you guys make any fairy houses this summer, feel free to email us at kids@cranstonlibrary.org. We would love to see them and feature them on our website. Take care and have a great day.